itself.
Hey, Bet.
So when you said
You might be hearing my radio because I'm listening to the radio.
when time began,
Yeah.
how close can we get to that start?
Okay, that's a good question. So we can tell the story with confidence from a second time, because that's when the first atomic nuclei were made, 1 second after the Big Bang. And we can push that further back about 100,000 of a second, which is when protons and neutrons. You know, and you can ask some of my friends, they say you can go even further back because we can do experiments, Switzerland, let's say, where we can simulate what the universe was like at about 1 trillion of a second. And you say, wow, that is so close to zero. Yeah, from our human perspective, it is. But for a particle, it's an eternity. Because a photon, a particle of light, in a trillionth of a second can go across a proton distance, the distance of the size of a proton, a trillion times. So you try growing a trillion times around the Earth, for example. So those times that for us look ridiculous are huge for those particles, which is what existed there. The effort, of course, is to always push this as further back as you can.
Could we ever know what was before?
I don't think so, but that's a debatable answer on my part. The concept of before and after comes if you believe in the flow of time. Mm-hmm. And as Stephen Hawking very wisely said once, he said, asking what happened before the Big Bang is asking what is north of the North Pole. That's where language fails reality.
Can you imagine in your head any feeling, any sense of before the Big Bang?
No.
Really? Not even?
I mean,
not even blankness?
I've worked in models, mathematical models, where instead of having a Big Bang, you have an infinite sequence of Big Bangs. So the universe expands and then collapses and expands and collapses. The universe is like a beating heart.
Wow.
And right now we are in one cycle, which is the cycle of expansion, that eventually is going to end and is going to go back. And every time this happens, the laws of nature may change. But this is all very speculative. It's awesome to do those models, but we don't know. Unfortunately, despite 50 years of very hard work by very smart people, we have beautiful theories like string theory and a bunch of others, but we don't really have an understanding. So we don't know what the Big Bang is, and in my opinion, it's an unknowable. It's not a question science can answer.
I keep thinking about a thing you said earlier, that you're a trail runner and an ultra-marathoner, right? So, like, how long is an ultra-marathon?
It depends on the race, on the terrain. I've done 100K races, so about 62 miles that took me 28 hours to finish.
You just run for 20 hours?
Well, you run, you hike, you walk, you sit, you eat, you run, you hide, yeah. But the idea is to cover the distance in the fastest possible way.
So I was thinking, you said there's a thing in that community you save to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Do you feel like doing those extreme marathons is almost like training for thinking in the kind of terms we've been talking about?
Yes.
Really?
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, because just think about it. So research can be very frustrating because you're always pushing the boundaries of your knowledge, right? And you're going into places you don't know, and you don't know if you're going to be successful. In fact, failure is essential in research. And the same happens when you push the boundaries of your body beyond the limits that you think are possible. If you had told me 15 years ago that I was going to go out and run 50 miles or 60, 70 miles in a day, I would say There is just no way that can be done. But guess what? It can be done. But it is through tremendous amounts of training and suffering. You have to deal, we call it the pain cave, you have to deal with a lot of physical pain, a lot of physical suffering because you're hungry, you're severely calorie deprived. I mean, you're spending 5,000, 6,000 calories or more in a race like this, and you cannot eat that much. So you're weak, you are dehydrated, your muscles hurt like crazy, and you still push on. As you do these things, you're really stripped of everything that you think you are. Your arrogance, your sense of I'm the best, or your sense of I know this, or the sense that you are in control. You're not in control anymore. Your body is falling apart, and yet you go with a sense of purpose. Well, that's exactly what we do when we're doing research, and we try and we fail, and sometimes it's exhausting mentally, and yet you push the boundaries, and there is more. In the ultra running, in the trail running, when you're really tired, that's when the spiritual connection with nature really is magnified, because you're stripped of yourself. It's deep moving meditation, and you fall into some sort of transcendent state of the self that is very profound. Sometimes you cry, sometimes you have these incredible highs of joy, and sometimes you have some very deep lows of pain and suffering, but you are completely stripped to the absolute essence of who you are, and you get to know yourself so much better for that.
In my head, I have the image so strongly of you as that 12-year-old boy standing on the shore, just looking for hours at the horizon, the place where the two worlds of sky and ocean meet. And it just seems to me that something in you propels you toward that horizon all the time. Is everybody in your family as driven to reach that boundary?
I don't think so.
Why do you think you are?
Why do I think that my mother's death turned me into a guy obsessed with life. And I think that, if anything, my biggest drive is that I love being alive, and every day should be a celebration of that.
Thank you. It was wonderful talking with you. Thank you.
Very emotional.
That's good.
Yeah, it's a big conversation.
That's Marcelo Gleiser. He's a theoretical physicist, essayist, and endurance trail runner. He's written 7 books about science and philosophy. His most recent is The Dawn of a Mindful Universe. This is episode 3 of Deep Time, a series about reclaiming a different kind of time. Less clock-driven, more earth-based. So what changes if we think about time on the scale of the universe, on the scale of a subatomic particle, or a neutron star, a black hole, or 1,000 galaxies? For writer Marjolein van Heemstra, it was kind of transformative.
When I was writing the book, it was end of 2018, beginning of 2019, and at least here in Europe, for a lot of people, it was really a time when we really woke up to the idea of climate change. And it was also the time that people started to feel this sort of panic and not being able to breathe because what is coming at us. From this place of worry, also with 2 very small children at the time, I started to look for something that would give me, like, literally perspective. Because when you have the feeling that future is no longer something to look forward to, it can make time seem very suffocating. And life seem a bit suffocating. And then I remembered this photo.
It's a photo of the Hubble Ultra Deep Field.
When I first saw it, it looked like a lot of fractures, as if something has broken into millions of pieces. What you actually see is 3,000 galaxies, photographed in a time frame of 3 months. And it's so huge. I mean, we cannot even imagine how big it is. And it's only a fraction of everything there is. This photo moved me very much because from one side, it makes you very small. You can be annihilated in comparison to that. On the other hand, you're yourself in relation to something so big.
Writer Marjolein van Heemstra. The title of her new book says it all. In light years, there's no hurry. We'll be back with more cosmic perspectives after this. I'm Anne Strange Champs, and this is To the Best of Our Knowledge from Wisconsin Public Radio and PRX.
Northwest Public Broadcasting has many frequencies, so wherever you travel in the state, you can tune in and listen to your favorite shows. Maps with the frequencies are at nwpb.org. Click on About Us to see that coverage map, or listen now and stream your favorite service.
I'm Lorelei Herber. If you're looking for more ways to stay connected with Northwest Public Broadcasting, check out and follow NWPB on Instagram. It's the perfect place to stay informed about upcoming events, catch up on local news, and engage with other listeners. Find out more by visiting NWPB on Instagram. Keep NWPB running by donating to the fund drive today. Just go to nwpb.org. Thank you for your support.
We're talking about time, cosmology, and the universe this hour. Unfathomably large concepts. But that's kind of the point. We're living in tense times. Somewhere it always feels like a clock is ticking. So when you're trying to cope with rising urgency and anxiety, it helps to go bigger. Marjolein van Heemstra is the poet laureate of Amsterdam and also a space reporter. And a few years ago, she read about something called the overview effect, a mental shift many astronauts have reported. Steve Paulson, who is always up for a cosmic perspective, called Marjolein in Amsterdam to ask what it is.
Yeah, the overview effect is this sort of overwhelming experience, also a sort of change of mentality that astronauts can experience when they look at Earth from space. And many of them have reported on this when they came back. I must say not all of them. Some of them sort of seemed very immune to the experience, but a lot of the astronauts come back a little changed, having seen how Earth is not a collection of all different places. It's a unity. It's like one animal. It really changes your life. I even read that people coming back from the Apollo program, they weren't allowed to join the army anymore because they were afraid that they would be so soft after this trip that it's ridiculous to fight people because borders are just man-made. So it's absurd. I know that one of them said something like, "Look at that, you son of a bitch. How can we ever fight against something like that?"
So you developed a project where you wanted to see if you could find some equivalent on Earth.
Yeah.
Not blasting off into space, but just through our lives here. How did you go about searching for this?
Well, I decided to make a space trip on Earth. So for about a year, I visited a lot of people and projects that were all dealing with space travel or cosmology. So poets, but also theologians, people in labs that were preparing for Mars missions. That was my sort of being an urban astronaut. And also I realized that if I wanted to have an experience in which I could sort of see unity, I should also do that in my own neighborhood, for example, where gentrification was a huge problem, still is, and I was sort of the face of this gentrification. So I decided, okay, I will focus both on the stars and on the little garden I share with my neighbors. to really zoom out and really zoom in at the same time.
I get looking out, but looking into your neighborhood, how does the overview effect play into that?
Well, I decided that besides writing about space and using all those insights in my own life, I should bridge the gap between me and my neighbor Bob, who lives under me. And Bob is really the face of like the old neighborhood, the people who suffer from the gentrification, the people who feel a big distance between them and people like me coming in and, sort of setting up the neighborhood to what we want and what we need. You don't go to space alone, right? You have someone with you. So I thought I should take Bob as my fellow astronaut on Earth.
Tell me more about that. How did you connect in this larger project of sort of experiencing space?
Well, it was really quite easy, actually. I asked him about his experience and, he remembered the first moon landing, for example. And I asked him when he felt this overview effect, and he told me about walking his dogs and looking at the sunset and having this idea of freedom and connection with everything. Looking at his fishes were very important to him. He ended up giving me the fishes, which I felt a little bit bad about that, but it was his own choice. Only some of them died because I didn't take care of them well enough. But anyway, also we ended up doing a theater show together through the country with this story, and we became very close. We still are.
You also mentioned that you have 2 young kids. It's not as if you're just going off having these experiences of awe. I mean, you're dealing with the messiness of daily life, reading, about all the troubles in the world, the wars and poverty and authoritarianism and all of that, while you were seeking these transcendent experiences. I'm wondering sort of, how do you make sense of the overview effect? How do you put that in context in the midst of all this stuff that happens in our lives?
Well, the thing is, what I think that they see, these people from space, is that everything happens all at once, in the same time, in the same place. Because you see this organism in space and there is a war, there is love, there is peace, it's all there. And it's all carried by this little, well, it's not that little, but from space it is, by this little planet. But also, if you zoom into your own life, you realize always how everything is existing next to each other, right? So somehow, for me, the essence maybe of the overview effect was the coexistence of everything. Also, COVID happened when I was writing this book, which was interesting because then we had all these interviews with astronauts because they were the experts on living in an enclosed environment. So, yeah, that made me feel like an astronaut as well.
Now, I know one thing you did was you started going out at night. You wanted to see the night sky. You wanted to be in darkness, which is probably a little hard to do being in Amsterdam, in the middle of a very lit up city. How did you try to embrace darkness?
Oh, well, I think in that way, writing this book has really changed my life because I've become a darkness activist almost full time now. We are one of the most light polluted cities in the world, so it's really bad. So I started this project called the Night Watch. This September, we organized our first Amsterdam Dark Festival, and we had 2,000 people going into the night.
Why are you so interested in being in darkness? Why do you think that matters to us?
Well, first, of course, I came into the darkness because I wanted to see the stars. But then, of course, living in Amsterdam was so hard to find, and I started to dig more into the light pollution and what it actually does to animals, to people, how it makes us more depressed, more obese, how many insects it kills. And what I also noticed is when you're in darkness, you experience your surroundings so differently. Not being able to really see your own boundaries, you feel, in a way, maybe what the overview effect can also give you. You feel like you transcend yourself a little bit.
You talked with one astronomer who said that if you really want to get the effect, it just bowls you over, you have to be able to see at least 450 stars.
Yes. Yeah, like 400. Okay, so there's a sort of a boundary for how many stars you need. Yeah, so 450 stars. Well, we don't have that in Amsterdam.
But I mean, it's one thing to look up at the night sky and see the Big Dipper and a few stars and a couple of planets and the moon. it's something else to see literally hundreds of stars. It's an entirely different experience.
Yeah, and the Milky Way as well, I think. That really adds to the experience. Yeah, totally.
Why? What changes, do you think?
It's a sense of something uncontrollable. I think this whole feeling of awe is about not having control. If I look up here in Amsterdam, I see maybe 70 stars and some satellites. So it still feels like a human-made world. And I think if you have this sense of so many stars and seeing the Milky Way, it's like literally uncountable. And that's where the dizziness comes in, and that's where you get lost a little bit. But I think you need this sense of being a bit lost to be overwhelmed because, well, yeah, you have to let go of this feeling of control. And that's why I like walking in the dark so much, because you have to go very slow because you can fall and you never know what's going to happen. And you lose the way, even if you know a place, you lose the way all the time.
So one final question. I was struck by one of your notes at the end of your book about a piece of music that you listen to a lot. It's Max Richter's On the Nature of Daylight, which was part of the score for the film Arrival, which of course was all about first contact with an alien intelligence. Why that piece of music? What does that do for you?
Well, I think it has to do with deep time and how our ideas of time can maybe change by looking at space a bit more. And that film, I've watched it a few times, but it just moved me so much about how we are stuck in this chronological time. And for me, it was a very, maybe it's a big word, but in a way healing to realize more and more how many years things have existed before we came. That even looking at the moon is like 4.2 billion years since it was formed, and all these layers of Earth that are sort of the memory of our planet. So if you look at time, like human time at this moment, it's frightening because we don't know where it's going. We don't know how long we have until it gets really uncomfortable. And for many people, it already is. So it's a frightening time in a way. But then it's a little bit, I don't know if I can find the right word, because I don't want to say like, it's nothing, the planet will restore itself, but it is a little bit comforting that the planet has been there for so long without us. And
Excuse me, I'm trying to open a door.
And we shouldn't do everything we have in our power to stop what's happening now. But, Earth will continue, and many of these time layers will continue, and new time layers will come, and we will be part of a new layer. And we might be part of the oil that another civilization will use for their transport, whatever. And that somehow is a comforting idea.
Marjolein van Hamstra talking with Steve Paulson. She's the poet laureate of Amsterdam,
Volcano
a space
Town.
reporter,
No active
and author
volcanoes.
of In Light Years, There's No Hurry. One of the best antidotes I've found to feeling stuck in chronological time is cosmology. I can't tell you how many people have recommended Carlo Rovelli's book, The Order of Time, to me. It'll make you question everything you thought you knew about reality. Rovelli's an Italian physicist trying to bridge the gap between Einstein's theory of general relativity and quantum physics. He writes about time and black holes, and now white holes. And when the stars aligned recently, we both wound up in Santa Fe on the same day and arranged an interview. He had a cold, I was running late, but somehow I did finally make it to his door, bearing orange juice and cough drops and microphones. I was feeling tense about whether this was going to happen, whether we'd manage to do the interview, and then I sat down at breakfast. I told you I took The Order of Time, was kind of rereading some of it, and there were passages that just jumped out at me, especially, we think the world is things, it's events. Mm-hmm. And just for a second, I thought, well, if I just think of all of this as just events, I'm just in a sea of events, it's okay.
Yeah.
Does this make sense to you at all?
A lot. Because it has happened the same to me.
Has it? Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how does that play out?
Well, I get stressed like everybody else. I panic about time like everybody else. I have too many things to do which I cannot do, and like everybody else, of course. But actually, I don't know. It's just my physics, or just simple fact of growing older.
So you've been working on white holes, your new book. And that's a whole new picture of what time can do. Time can reverse. Time can go backwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perhaps the biggest surprise in the last decades in science is that the universe is full of black holes.
Which 20 years ago, black holes were contentious. Some scientists didn't think black holes did exist. And now there's photographs of them.
Mm-hmm. Very clear evidence. The photographs with the gravitational wave produced by black holes. So now we're all convinced that there are black holes out there. Not only there are black holes out there, but there are many black holes out there.
What was it like for you to see that first photograph of the black hole? Do you remember?
Yes, it was an incredible emotion. It's like, you've been studying an animal mysterious all your life, and then you see it. Wow, it exists, it's real.
Do people, I don't know, jump up and down?
Actually, the best experience has not been the picture of the black hole, which is a few years ago, but a little bit before that, there was the announcement of the detection of the gravitational waves that was produced by a black hole. Since there are so many black holes in the sky, they can meet and fall into one another. They fall into one another, they start orbiting, turning around, then orbiting faster and faster, getting closer and closer, faster, closer, then whoop, they just eat each other, so to say. And if they do so, they produce this enormously strong oscillation of space, which is what was detected. The announcement of that was given publicly, and the press conference was during a class I was giving to my students in Marseille on general relativity. So I told the students, look, there is this press conference, they say their gravitational waves have not shown what they've seen, and they say they've seen it. And I turned the computer on in front of the class, but before I gave them the theory. I explained them that the black hole can merge and they produce this wave, and oscillations which first is slow and weak and then become faster and higher. So if it was a sound, it would be something like whoop. It's a chirp of the chirp of the black hole. Whoop. And I drew the shape of this wave of the black hole. And then we turned the computer on to the press conference.
The black holes are getting closer and closer to one another.
There was great emotion.
They're going to merge. Boom. The first time that this has ever been seen.
As someone said,
we can hear gravitational waves. We can hear the universe.
And this is a signal that we have measured.
There's a rumbling noise, and then there's a chirp.
The shape of the wave appears, and is exactly what the shape I've drawn on the black hole.
That's the chirp we've been looking for.
And the students, there was a class of 20, 30 students, all together, wow! There's like science at its best, when you really science is shining.
Gravitational waves. We did it.
So, I'm thinking that people listening might think, I thought you were talking about time. Why are you talking about black holes?
Oh, because
but I think black holes have a lot to do
because
with
black holes is all about time.
How so?
A black hole is a deformation of space and a deformation of time. So if you go near a black hole, if you look backward, you see the rest of the universe going faster and faster and faster. So time goes at different speed. And if you fall into the black hole, what I think is going to happen, this is a white hole, and you find yourself billions and billions and billions of years in the future.
Wow. So what is a white hole?
So, but the white holes, this is where quantum gravity comes in. So this is where Einstein theory is not good anymore, and quantum gravity is needed. And what quantum gravity says, evolution in which the black hole becomes longer and narrower stops and bounces back, comes back. There's a bounce. And everything that was falling in now is jumping up, is bouncing back. And that's a white hole.
So, in some ways, it's the same as the black hole. It's just in reverse.
Exactly. It's the same process as a black hole, but in reverse.
I'm imagining putting my hand inside a glove and then pulling my hand.
Oh, very good. Exactly. But the white holes are also prediction of Einstein equations. And like black hole in the past, you can find in books, oh yeah, but these are not real things, just predictions that don't exist in the real universe. But I believe that they may well.
Just wait.
Just wait.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Our senses tell us that the world is made of things.
Yeah.
But science, and especially quantum physics, tells us, no, the world is made of happenings.
Yes, the world is not made of things. Once we study things, objects, we realize that they are actually processes. Why? Because a glass, for instance, is really making dancing electrons and protons one around the other, who just, in the dance, keep a sort of shape for a while. But it's for a while.
Why do I find this so comforting?
It is, because it brings serenity, lightness to the world. One reason for which I find this emotionally meaningful is because, of course, we ourselves are processes and not things.
Yeah. It's a remark you make near the end of White Holes, that we keep making the mistake of thinking that we are studying something that's out there, whereas in fact we're always studying it from inside. Time, you can't really study time from the outside.
Yes. Well, whatever we're studying ourselves.
Oh, shoot.
At the end of the day. And we recognize the things of nature as brothers and sisters of us. We have learned with Darwin, absolutely literally, that we're brothers and sisters of all the rest of the living beings on Earth, because we have common ancestors. You and I, your mother, my father, were making love together years ago, and the same is true with plants and with birds. So we're just part of what we see around us, and we want to relate to things, not like me and that. To relate to things like me and you. And that's what pulls us towards things. That's why we study black holes, I think, and study white holes, because they are our brothers, and we exist by getting a relation to them.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk so beautifully about saying that we should really not talk about the universe as it. We should address the universe as you.
You.
I guess what I keep being curious about is, having thought about time for so long and discovered things about time, do you now, in ordinary life, notice things about time that other people don't, that I might not?
Maybe all this has given me, and coming back to the first question, more serenity.
Yeah?
I view myself as a little wave in the happening of things. That helps me to accept my responsibility, but also my lack of importance. The fact that my life is finite, I'm going to die, and that's not too bad. View reality in this fluid and, I would say, unstable, constantly unstable way, it helps accepting everything.
Yeah. That's Carlo Rovelli. He's an Italian theoretical physicist, author of The Order of Time, which was an international bestseller, and he's got a new book out called White Holes. A big thank you to the people at the Santa Fe Institute for helping us meet in person. And more thanks to go around. Deep Time is a special series produced with help from our friends at the Center for Humans and Nature and with generous support from the Calliopeia Foundation. You'll find more information and more Deep Time episodes on our website at ttbook.org/deeptime. To the Best of Our Knowledge is produced at Wisconsin Public Radio by Charles Monroe Kane, Shannon Henry Kleiber, Mark Rickers, and Angela Bautista. Our technical director and sound designer is Joe Hartke, with help from Sarah Hopeful. Additional music this week from Kai Engel, Sergei Cheremisinov, and Ketsa. The executive producer of To the Best of Our Knowledge is Steve Paulson, and I'm Anne Strainchamps. From all of us happy night walking and stargazing. Somewhere in the dark, we're out there right along with you.
PRX.
It is just about 8 p.m. Tonight in the Palouse, you will be seeing cloudy skies, a chance of rain, lows in the lower 40s to lower 50s, and some wind gusts around 25 miles per hour. On the west side of the Cascades tonight, expect rain, lows near 50, and wind gusts around 30 miles per hour. If you enjoy hearing the weather and news you can trust here on NWPB, make sure to donate during this funded drive to keep this station on the air. Donate today at nwpb.org.
This is Northwest Public Broadcasting on KRFA HD2 Digital Radio Pullman, coming to you from the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication at Washington State University. This publicly supported NPR News service streams online at nwpb.org, on the mobile app, and on your smart speaker.
It's to the best of our knowledge. Can mushrooms save the world?
Anybody who gets close to mushrooms becomes a mushroom obsessive. If you talk to any mycologists, they are the most idiosyncratic people, the most passionate people, and they very quickly become convinced that mushrooms explain everything and can essentially save the world.
Oh my God.
I'm Anne Strand-Champs, and today, mushrooms. Some can heal you, some can kill you, and some can change you forever.
It is still absolutely mysterious, appalling, challenging, boundary dissolving, and unavoidably ecstatic. It is the living mystery.
The magic of mushrooms.
Ribbit.
And the stoned ape theory of human evolution. First this.
Live from NPR News in Washington, D.C., I'm Dale Wilman. Ceasefire negotiations got underway in Saudi Arabia Sunday between Ukrainian and American delegations. Talks will also be held between the U.S. and Russia on Monday. As NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports, President Trump says he wants to end the war, but Moscow launched massive drone attacks on Kyiv this weekend that have killed at least 7 people.
Air defenses battled a massive drone attack Saturday night in Kyiv.
I'm listening to the
Sunday,
radio.
The city mourned. People gathered.
I do like the radio sometimes, and today the radio kept me.
19-year-old Tatiana,
so I can still listen to the radio and play video games.
The last 3 months, it's everyday bombing, and it's every day, like every night. It's always a terrible sound, and you're just laying in your bed and thinking, oh my God, this bomb going to my house or near.
In his nightly speech Sunday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said it should be clear to everyone that Russia is the one who is dragging this war out.
Guess what?
He called on Ukraine's allies to put more pressure on Russia to end the war. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Kyiv.
Canadians are going to the polls on April 28th for a national election, as Dan Karpenchuk reports.
Tomorrow, I'm going to turn 19 years old.
Recent polls suggest Carney's Liberals are in a tight race with the opposition Conservatives. And this election campaign, only 5 weeks long, will focus on the main issue of tariffs and annexation talk from President Donald Trump.
I'm going to go
Carney
agate
says
hunting tomorrow for my
Prime
birthday.
Minister, he's initiated several major changes, including getting rid of the unpopular carbon tax and expanding dental
Hopefully
care
I
to more than
find
4 million
agates.
Canadians. So Carney has asked for a strong mandate from voters in what he described as the most consequential election.
If I do find agates, I'm going to post them
Conservatives led by
on
Pierre
my channel.
Poilievre continue to say
But
Carney
yeah,
still
I
represents the
am
old
going
liberals
agate
and
hunting.
policies, and it's time for a change.
Thanks.
For NPR News, I'm Dan Karpenchuk in Toronto.
Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin
One of my
attended the
birthday
recreation of
presents
Patrick
was
Henry's Give Me
a
Liberty or Give Me Death speech on Sunday. The event took
rock
place
pick,
250
which
years
is like
to the day when it
a
was first given in the same church
hammer
in Richmond, Virginia.
meant for
Radio
rocks.
IQ's Brad Kuttner
And then
reports
someone
that
else
outside
got
the church,
me a
demonstrators
metal
held signs
detector that can
criticizing
go
the governor
underwater.
and President Donald Trump.
So I'm going to be finding all the rocks.
Protesters sang patriotic songs as they surrounded St. John's Church in Richmond's East End. Inside the chapel, "Give me liberty or give me death," Patrick Henry's fifth great-grandson, Patrick Henry Jolly, reenacted the famous speech, and Governor Glenn Youngkin spoke of the importance of the spirit of America. But he also acknowledged those outside criticizing him.
I am happy to do whatever it takes to get someone to church on Sunday.
Gross.
Youngkin smiled and waved as he passed protesters when he left
Someone
the event.
just said, I need you to go to
For NPR
church.
News, I'm Brad Kuttner in Richmond.
And you're listening to
They are
NPR
currently
News.
hanging out upstairs.
Disney's Snow White
And
is
they're hanging out
dominating the
with
box
their
office this
kitty.
weekend, but that may not mean
But
she's turning a profit.
I think they're going to
as
be
NPR's
done
Bob
hanging
Mondello
out
tells us.
Snow White easily dwarfed the competition.
nowish. So we're going to live stream together.
The rest of the box office top 10 from the made barely half
Oliver
as
did
much as
say they
Snow White
wanted to
did,
live stream.
but this live-action remake of Disney's first animated feature only took in $87 million worldwide, and that means making back its $270 million production cost
Point me in the right direction?
is going to be difficult. Disney's had a lot of success with live remakes
Yeah,
of its animated
I think you'll be
classics,
able to hear
and
from
even when they
Oliver
don't
pretty
cast a
soon.
spell at the box office,
I'm
they
just
feed
playing
the
this
company's
game so I
other
can listen to the
revenue
radio.
streams. Disney Plus sales
And I was
of
like,
merchandise, theme
I was
park
actually
rides,
playing
TV
this
shows
game
on
without
Broadway.
streaming, and I was
So
like,
for Hollywood, it's a disappointing
but
start in a year that has
the
yet
radio
to
is
have
not
a smash
offensive,
hit.
and I'm just listening to it.
Pakistan officials say security forces killed 16 militants Sunday in a remote northwestern border area. They say the militants were trying to enter the
I'm just
country
playing this
from
game
neighboring
because
Afghanistan.
one of my goals in
The
this game is
military
to
said
actually
those who were
play
killed were
every
part of the
character that is
Pakistani
available
Taliban.
and beat the game with it.
During the first Trump administration, many journalists worried most about being called
So
fake
I'm
news.
just
They now
knocking
face a more
out
assertive President Donald Trump in his second
characters.
term as a
Like
list
this,
of
I can
action by
beat
his
this
new
game in an
administration.
hour
As journalists
with
on their
every
heels,
character.
media outlets are
Like, I
facing
mean,
lawsuits and
1 hour per
investigations and threats to
character.
their business. Supporters of the president suggest that an overdue correction is in order to reflect new ways that Americans get their information. I'm Dale Willman, and you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the George Lucas Educational Foundation, creator of Edutopia, dedicated to improving the learning experience for America's students by sharing what works in pre-K through 12 education
No worries, Bat.
at edutopia.org.
It's to the best of our knowledge. What if I told you that you owe your existence to a mushroom?
Oh yes, Fungus Man. Fungus Man is very interesting. He's the personification of a large bracket fungus.
Lawrence Millman, with a story from way back in the mists of time.
Fungus Man was a friend of Raven, who created the world. Raven created man, but then scratched his head. What should I do next? There doesn't seem to be any more of the species I've just created. But Fungus Man was quite smart. He told Raven, I can take you in my canoe to the island where female genitalia scamper around.
What?
And they arrive on this island, and there are all these female genitalia scampering over the rocks. The description in the myth
Yeah,
makes them
I heard
look
it
a little
too.
bit like kite and shell. So Raven is really happy. He collects a lot of them and takes them back and affixes them to the men. They therefore become women, and then the men who don't have them affixed to themselves look very happily at the men who do, who are now women.
This is weird.
As the old man who told me this story said, if it wasn't for Fungus Man, I wouldn't be telling you this story, and you wouldn't be here to listen to it.
lot of truth buried in myths. I'm Anne Strainchamps, and this one is from the Haida First Nation people in British Columbia. And the truth? We do owe our past and maybe future existence on Earth to the kingdom of mushrooms. Fungi.
Let's go back in time. Most people may not realize that we shared a common ancestor with fungi 650 million years ago.
Mycologist Paul Stamets.
Yep.
Fungi were the
We're
first
talking about
organisms to
genetics
come to
now.
land. As they grow, they lead the path, and then plants came to land several hundred million years after fungi. Now we go back to 250 million years ago, and we had a great cataclysmic event. Enormous amounts of debris were jettisoned into the atmosphere. Sunlight was choked off, probably for decades. We don't know how long.
So without mushrooms, we
Massive
wouldn't have
extinction.
plants.
Most plants and animals became extinct, and fungi inherited the earth. And those organisms that paired with fungi survived. And this is a lesson that we need to learn. We are now in 6X, the sixth greatest extinction event known in the history of life on this planet. We pair with fungi, we will hopefully survive this extinction event.
Because of fungi.
Can mushrooms save the world? Let's find out. First of all, can I just say,
Ribbit.
other than when I'm cooking, I don't really think about mushrooms all that much. But then Steve Paulson started talking about Paul Stamets. This has to be the most passionate mycologist on the planet. Paul is an evangelist for the healing power of mushrooms. He spends his time roaming old-growth forests in the Pacific Northwest looking for rare species. And he works with the U.S. Defense Department and the NIH to develop new technologies and new medicines from mushrooms.
Yeah, there are.
For example.
Well, of course, everyone knows about penicillin that came from a mold, but many of the mushroom-producing fungi are very strongly active against bacteria, including MRSA, staph, including E. coli, and I'm doing research against Mycobacterium tuberculosum. One of our fungi from the old-growth forest, which is called agarikon, shows to be highly active against orthopoxes, including smallpox. And so much of my resources and attention has been focused on getting as many strains of this old-growth fungus in culture as possible, because it's rapidly on the decline, and as pollution and the forests are cut back, we're losing what I call mycodiversity, and it's very important that we preserve some of these ancestral strains before they become extinct.
So tell me how this would work. I mean, suppose there was an outbreak of smallpox. How might this particular fungus be used as a remedy?
So what's unique about this fungus, it used to grow in Europe.
I
It's
actually
now
can't see
practically
chat.
extinct. The ancient name is
Because
called
I'm using my
but the
cell
Greek
phone to
name
listen
for it
to
was Elixirium ad longum vitam, the elixir of long
NPR,
life. And
so I
Hippocrates
can't
first published it
load
in
chat.
65 AD as a
But
treatment against consumption.
I saw that
A
your
respiratory
stomach feels
illness later
like
thought to be
pee.
tuberculosis. And so
I hope
we
you're
have a
feeling all
mystery
right.
at hand, because agarikon is duly active against DNA viruses, which is pox
I hope
and
you're doing all
herpes,
right.
and RNA viruses, which is flu A's and flu B's. And that's a conundrum, because most
Feeling like
virologists
pop?
would say, well, that's not right. And it may well be that this agarikon mushroom, for instance, it grows like 100 feet up in the trees oftentimes, so I have to find them in the trees.
Oh, guess what?
Or else climb the trees.
That's usually not what you say.
But is subject to 100-mile-an-hour winds, hundreds
That's
of
cool.
inches of rain per year. And yet this mushroom grows for up to 75 years under these adverse conditions.
You know,
And
when
this
I
mushroom
eat
does not
food
rot.
and I eat way too much food,
Good
sometimes
question.
I
I'm asking
actually
the same
say,
question as
I'm
well,
not
and I
going to eat
think we can
tomorrow.
benefit
I had
from
way too
examples in
much
nature.
food.
And that's what we are on the path to discovery, hopefully.
You have been talking about how you love doing your research in old-growth forests, and you live in the state of Washington. And you've brought into the studio a huge fungus, or is it a mushroom, I guess?
Oh my goodness,
I'm
come
not
on.
exactly sure what the difference is there.
So, yes, this is a mushroom. Now, there's 1 to 2 million species of fungi estimated in the kingdom. 10% are mushroom-forming fungi, about 150,000 species. But we've only identified 14,000 species so far. So more than 90% of the species of mushrooms have not yet been identified. This one is a large wood conch.
It's roughly, what, about 1.5 feet long, maybe a foot high, sort of roughly the shape of an oversized football.
Well, it looks to many people like a wasp nest or a beehive.
Right. Yes.
And it has concentric rings of growth, and those are annual growth rings. It's hard like wood. In fact, TSA broke my agaricon
as you were going through the airport.
I was going through the airport. They wanted to know what was inside of it. I was horrified. It's a fungus. What's inside of it? More fungus, right?
So this is a particularly rare mushroom.
This is one of the rarest mushrooms in the old-growth forest. It's exclusive to the old-growth forest, now thought to be extinct in Europe. The more that I study this mushroom, the more excited I am. It's really, I think, could go down in history as a medical breakthrough, as a resource for novel antibacterial and antiviral medicines.
They're getting closer to getting me.
You know, there have also been fungi used to help clean up toxic waste sites, right?
Yeah, that's mycoremediation. That's something I've been actively involved in. Running these mycelial mats on wood chips outdoors, downstream from factories and farms. And the mycelial networks capture pollutants, and they gobble them up.
What do these mats look like?
Everyone can see them today. Just go outside, find a piece of wood, and just tip the piece of wood up. And you'll see underneath this white velvet fine fibrous network called mycelium. It's analogous to the roots of an apple tree gives rise to the tree that gives an apple. Well, the roots are the mycelial network that is in all landscapes. And under certain conditions, it produces a fruit, which is called mushrooms. The largest organism in the world is a mycelial mat in eastern Oregon. It's 2,200 acres in size, 1,665 football fields.
You're saying this is one single organism?
One single organism, and it's one cell wall thick. When you see it dense on the ground, there can be more than 8 miles of mycelium per cubic inch. This is the foundation of the food web. These are the interface organisms between life and death, and they build soil.
So what kinds of toxic substances then are sucked up by this mycelium?
A whole pantheon of compounds. These are grand molecular disassemblers. We've been able to break down diesel spills, oil spills. 2 of our fungi broke down VX, soman and sarin, which is a potent neurotoxin.
So the trick, in a sense, to having a successful cleanup operation at a waste site, particularly a toxic waste site, is to be able to break down those nasty substances. And you're saying fungi have particular properties that can do that.
Indeed. A lot of the hydrocarbon-based contaminants, even pesticides and herbicides, we actually can break them down with fungi. There's a mushroom called turkey tail, Ytteromydes versicolor, that's circumpolar all over the world, grows on wood, and has an amazing property.
Ooh, I got a frog.
Mercury. Even when it's dead, you can powder this mycelium up, and you can throw it into mercuric ions in water. And the mycelium hyperaccumulates selenium. And the selenium and the mercury come together as a bimolecular unit that makes it totally non-toxic. So the implications are enormous. These fungi offer a platform of solutions on multiple levels. And this is what's so exciting about them, but this is what nature is all about. Nature speaks to us all the time. We just need to listen.
So here you are telling us that mushrooms can, in some ways, help save the world. And yet my guess is that the vast majority of scientists kind of take mushrooms for granted, or they don't really think about it very much. So why are you out there when so few other people are, touting the great benefits of these things?
Well, I'm in great despair that something so important is so under-evaluated, understudied, underfunded, and not given the priority that it should be. I like to say that the mycology departments should be as well-funded as the computer science departments. It is that important for the survival of life on this planet. And it speaks a little bit to what we call mycophobia, the irrational fear of fungi.
Well, for one thing, we've heard that some of them are poisonous.
If a person dies from mushroom poisoning in the United States, virtually every news media will pick it up. Very few people do die from mushroom poisoning. Very few mushrooms, comparatively, are poisonous. Of course, you should know what mushrooms are edible or poisonous before you ingest them, just like anything. Thankfully, we're a pluralistic society, and we've benefited from Polish people and Europeans and the Japanese and Koreans and the Chinese. They're very mycophilic societies. The Chinese look at, for instance, the cordyceps mushroom that comes from insects as rebirth. It's a whole different psychology of looking at nature. And this is, Al Gore and E.O. Wilson and other people have spoke to this. But we are really in a serious trouble. It is far more serious than I think anyone fully realizes. We are in a massive extinction event, and E.O. Wilson predicts that 50% of the known species will become extinct in the next 100 years. What happens when we lose biodiversity and microdiversity? It's like losing rivets of an airplane. At some point, we'll undergo catastrophic failure. We are evolutionary successes today. Yahoo, we made it so far, but for how long? And I've often thought if there was a united organization of organisms, otherwise called would we be voted on the planet or off the planet? I think that vote's happening right now, and unless we get our act together and join with nature, we could perhaps be a victim of the extinction event that we're creating.
That's mycologist Paul Stamets talking with Steve Paulson. Paul is a researcher and writer. He's filed 22 patents for mushroom-related technologies. He also runs a business called Fungi Perfecti.
I'm gonna let this guy populate, and then I'll start destroying
So as you guessed, we're talking about the wonders of mushrooms today. And I have to say, there is something both charming and also slightly weird about the level of devotion that mushrooms seem to inspire. It's like this really intense fan club or cult. I mean, there are people all over this country who will go to all kinds of extremes for a single mushroom.
Well, shiitakes are really rare.
Just last fall, here in New York, we had a really great
Don't worry.
maitake
I'll see you later, Bat.
which grow under mature oak. And we were having a fantastic time just looking up the names of cemeteries that had oak in the name. So then we go drive up to the cemetery and collect the mushrooms that are growing under the trees. And so on the way back from one of these cemetery hunts in the fall, I saw this really big maitake growing underneath a tree in somebody's front yard. This is in Long Island. And my husband and I were like, should we just grab it? No, we can't. It's just wrong. So after much walking back and forth in front of this poor person's house, I finally knocked on the door, and he was like, I was wondering what you're doing out there. And we said, is it okay if we take the mushroom? I'll give you half of it. And he said, no, get rid of it. I don't want it, How big was that mushroom? Well, probably about 14 pounds. Wow.
Jesus.
Really big mushroom. We could see it from the road.
Wow.
Grow to be tremendous.
14-pound mushroom.
Tremendous. Meet the mushroom hunters next. I'm Ann Strangchamps. It's to the best of our knowledge from Wisconsin Public Radio and PRX.
What is the eucalyptus?
If you just discovered Northwest Public Broadcasting, thank you for coming to this listener-supported station. We have 3 program streams. One brings you NPR news and information, the other classical music, and there's a 24-hour jazz service. Find the list of frequencies and listen to live streams at nwpb.org.
You're listening to
Sorry,
NWPB.
cool kid. I am actually listening to the radio while I stream.
Stay informed about the Northwest by visiting and subscribing to NWPB on YouTube. There you can find the latest episodes of Weekly News Now, which are short, accessible videos. Plus, watch the latest Artist Spotlight episodes. That's all on YouTube. Just search for NWPB. During this spring fund drive, lend your support to keep NWPB on the air. Simply go to nwpb.org or call 844-396-6002.
How far would you go for a mushroom? And you can't find them at the grocery store. But you could also start picking your own, maybe in secret, wild places you wouldn't tell even your closest friends about.
That's what they do.
Then you can start hanging out at mushroom festivals where you can drink mushroom beer and sing mushroom songs with other mushroom fans. At that point, you might start organizing your travel around mushroom seasons. Well, Eugenia Bone does all of that. She's a food writer and a self-described mycophiliac. Janet
It's
Henry
a
Kleiber caught
summons,
up
a
with her
pet
the
sugar
day before
glider, and
yet
it's
another
a
mushroom expedition.
million,
This one to
bagillion,
the Sierra
jagillion
Mountains
chance
to
to
hunt for
drop.
morels after a
Nice.
wildfire
Congrats,
with a
dude.
very big duffel bag. So morels, certain kinds of morels, grow in copious amounts after a fire. So the fire happens in the summer, and if there's enough rain in the spring, in certain habitats, these morels come up in huge numbers.
Ouchie.
And for the last, quite a few years, I've been going out to hunt whatever burns I could find. And so the Sierras have been burning for the last few years. So I fly out, I use my miles, I go on out there, I rent a car with knobby wheels, and we take off into the Sierras, and I bring home very large amounts of morels. I will probably bring 15 pounds of morels back that are fresh, and then more that are dried. So, yeah, I'll have
Dang,
a
that
duffel
guy's
full of
committed.
mushrooms. We pick a lot of mushrooms, and it's super fun. Morels, by the way, I think they're like $200 a pound. That's what you'd pay. So you can
Jesus.
do that. Yeah. Are they your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
15
I have
times
a sort of
200.
top
That's 3,000. No,
I love gypsy mushrooms.
300?
I love morels. I love porcini mushrooms, the boletus mushrooms. I love chanterelles. I love hedgehogs. I like all the wild ones the most, but the cultivated, I'm not going to turn up my nose at a nice plate of sautéed champignon.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Champignon.
So tell me about the taste of some of those favorites. Take me through the taste, because they all taste different from each other.
Well, to a degree, right? Mushrooms are mushrooms, so they're,
they have umami, right?
Yeah, they're all this sort of, exactly, this kind of meaty savoriness, and that's thought to be the result of, mushrooms contain a kind of pretty high-grade protein. So that meaty savoriness is what, you're tasting that high-grade protein when you eat a mushroom. That's where the umami flavor is thought to come from. One of the main differences, I think, between, say, let's look at maitake, right, which is the Grifola frondosa. It's like this feathery mushroom. It looks like a little hen. You find them under oak trees in the wild, and you can find them in the supermarket, too. They're cultivated. So the wild ones taste, it's like the difference between a domestic duck and a wild duck. The wild maitake are kind of gamier. You taste more different soil type things, soil and bark and leaves and, worms, and they're more complex in a way. Whereas the cultivated maitake, which are grown on a bag of oak chips, they don't have quite the complexity. So that's a distinctive difference. Then, the different tastes between the mushrooms, some are more nutty, like the porcini. Some are more perfumey or fruity, like the chanterelle. The truffles are amazing. They're like pretty much always a combination of certain strong flavors like garlic and BO. It's always like the BO quality. And I think that's what's just so great. People always romance about
I want to play. Actually, tomorrow is my birthday,
the wet leaves and
I would love to play Terraria on hardcore mode. If you're down to play tomorrow.
I do. And they're all like that. Even truffles, I've gone truffle hunting in Oregon. They have other species. The black truffle is like a cross between.
With that being said, one of my friends just got online. I do have to actually quit
There's
streaming.
little white one. That's
So
really
yeah,
kind of great. That's like a
cool kid.
armpit.
If you want to play Terraria tomorrow,
That's a great
I want to put in a
description.
good amount of
The
time.
very best kind of have
Thank you.
that kind of dichotomy of
I'm
like
gonna
something
play
amazing
Terraria
and something kind of awful.
on
and
hardcore
it makes
mode.
The combination.
What is it, master mode? Tomorrow.
That's what
Thank
makes
you
you
for
love,
watching.
slash lust
Thank
it.
you guys.
It's that it just turns.
I was just playing this while listening to the
in the
radio
past,
because I really had
one time
nothing
I
else to
remember I
do.
was at
But I just play
Sonoma
video games
in
all the time.
California. That's Sonoma.